Big Ten football fans, if you want real football, you're going to have to wait until that final Saturday of August. But we do about as well as we can in April. That's about as close as we get because spring football, NFL draft. So we will talk spring football here over the next couple hours with you. We will take your comments and questions there in the chat, of course. Super Chat's available. Also Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. And we will also take your calls. I will leave the link in the chat as well. We will take your calls. And we've got plenty of good guests stopping by. Justin Adams from right here at the Voice of College Football, GBR, also the Big Ten Show. Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm and our Hawkeyes live show here at the Voice of College Football every Tuesday at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. Christian Dyer, Rutgers Wire, and the Scarlet Knights playing its spring game on Saturday as well as Nebraska. And I believe Maryland playing a spring game on Saturday. And then we've got Marty Leap hopefully stopping by from Penn State rivals to talk Nittany Lions. All right, again, spring football, transfer portal, always those great debates that we have each and every day. Those are always fair game, rivalries, and otherwise. And we've got recruiting going on as well, although a bit in the background. We're at that time of year in which the next big wave of recruiting that we will see will be players visiting both during the spring games, which we've seen over the last couple of weekends, but also those camp visits, those official visits going on in all the camps that we see in May and June. And then we typically get a huge flurry of commitments in the summer. All right, let's get to the NFL draft first and foremost. I love the NFL draft. I was subjected to watching the NFL draft through the eyes of a few faceless dudes. I don't want to say that they're not good at what they do. I just had no idea who they are. But I also saw Chris Collinsworth, and that guy takes abuse all over the place for being annoying and such. I've always thought Chris Collinsworth was first rate. So I don't know who was showing. Oh, I do know who was showing this. This was PFF, Pro Football Focus. And so I still have yet to make a decision. And really, I'm enjoying my life minus cable television and minus whatever streaming service. I know that I'm going to have to make a decision about that. And I've had cable my entire life since I was like 10 years old. So will I get cable again? I don't know. But I will just give myself set for football, and everything else you can access anything. At least if you have my viewing habits, you can access anything. You can access whatever you want on YouTube. But when it comes to live sporting events, my live sporting event consumption has been dwindled down to almost nothing. Nothing but football. Did not watch the NCAA basketball tournament. Didn't watch the Final Four, the championship game. And when I say the Final Four, the championship game, I'm talking about the men, because I don't even really acknowledge the women's game because I've never watched it. But I used to be a big college football or college basketball fan. And so I'm just waiting for football. And for as much as I still believe that baseball is the most beautiful sport that's been created by Abner Doubleday and others, I don't partake in it. So I don't watch any baseball. Old baseball fan. If you would have told Mark Rogers in 2010, let's say 2015, even as recent as 2015, 16, 17, if you would have said, Mark, you are not going to be watching any baseball in 2024, 2023, 22, 21, 20, even 19, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have thought, are you kidding me? I pay for the extra inning plan. And I just didn't do that for the Indians. I did that because I wanted to watch everybody play. I paid for the extra innings package going back to 2004. Anyway, I don't think you came here for my viewing habits lecture, but I stumbled across my buddy contacted me. So I was out playing pickleball up until 8 o'clock when the place closes. And then I was going to come back here. And if I could find the NFL draft somewhere, great. If not, no big deal. I can track the picks and work on other things. And so I got a text from another friend who said something to the effect, I'm watching the NFL draft. He wasn't watching on ESPN, ABC, or I do not believe the NFL Network. So I don't know where he was coming across this show. And he was like, these guys are complete jackasses. They started the show. What up, dog? What up, Detroit? Geniuses. And so I said, I don't know who you're watching. And then I stumbled into Chris Collinsworth and crew, and they were talking hardcore football analysis. So that was fine with me. They were good. So thumbs up to the PFF crew. Maybe you'll give me a free subscription. All right, let's get to the NFL draft from the Big Ten angle. And I'm going to tie everything back to college football, of course. I have no analysis to give you in regards to these players being good fits for their respective teams. I don't know. I don't follow the NFL like that. I just watch the games on Sunday afternoon. I have no idea who needs what. That was me 20 years ago. I don't know that now. So I cannot evaluate franchises, who has a good franchise, who doesn't have a good franchise. I know that the San Francisco 49ers have a good franchise and the Kansas City Chiefs. Other than that, I have no idea. I can evaluate the players as college players. And then more so, what I want to get to is big picture. What does college football look like? And what was the NFL draft first round here in 2024? What was that indicative of? What does that give us indication to? Okay. Forever. We might as well say forever. I'm going to sound like a 25-year-old saying this. Forever meaning post 2005. The SEC has completely dominated college football. I said that in our last show during our transfer portal show, and I got some kickback from some folks. And then I just let them know that they were making dumb, ignorant statements. Yes, the SEC has been the dominant conference. It's not close. It's not debatable. Now, when the SEC if the Big Ten is to take that honor away from the SEC, there is certainly the opportunity to do that this fall. This is the closest that the Big Ten has been to the SEC in that entire time frame, but it has to be played out on the field. Yes, the Big Ten won a national championship courtesy Michigan this past season, but that does not mean you have the best conference just because you've got the national champion. That is obviously a stupid argument. Now, that's part of the argument, but that cannot be the entire argument. That is a small slice of the argument. The Big Ten was not better than the SEC last year, has not been better than the SEC for at least 17 or 18 years, but has the opportunity this year. And in last night's NFL draft, first round, we got an indication of what this sport is going to look like going forward. I have stated this in slicing up and dicing up this sport in a number of ways, that the two biggest brands in the sport are the SEC and the Big Ten for a number of reasons. Play on the field, recruiting, NFL draft prowess and play in the league, and then more so looking at what goes on off the field, the attention that the two leagues get on television, through media, and with the rear ends in the seats in the stadiums. Those are the two teams that obviously are the two conferences that rule college football and have in a subtle way. They have ruled college football in a subtle way for years and years and years and years. But now we've gotten to a place where the tangible, the intangible to a certain extent has become tangible. That the playoff percentage being I don't want to say unfairly, unevenly distributed to the SEC and the Big Ten going forward by 26% more than what the Big 12 and the ACC, for however long it exists, will receive. 26% more. And I've extrapolated that out and how many hundreds of millions of dollars that is going to be over the life of the contract. Okay. So we know that these leagues are already better, more relevant, have more power. All of that can't be debated. That's obvious for anyone to see. Last night's NFL draft gave us indication of how that is going to be just completely exponentially increased. So right now in the NFL, the SEC dominates with the highest number of NFL players, and it has for 20 years plus. That figure off the top of my head is somewhere in the trying to come up with the numbers, 350 to 370 range of NFL players that come from SEC schools. And this is held steady for a long time. The Big Ten is number 2. The Big Ten has been number 2 forever. No, the ACC has not eclipsed the Big Ten at any point, like some people have claimed, or the Big 12. No, the Big Ten is, if the SEC is around 350, 60, 70, then the Big Ten is around 270, 280, substantially behind, but respectfully behind. And then it's the ACC and the Big 12 and the Pac-12. And then, of course, you've got to account for different numbers of teams in the conferences. But between the Big 12 and the Pac-12, for as bad as the Pac-12 was prior to last season, prior to 2022, they were producing more NFL players than the Big 12 and producing more high-level players than the Big 12. The Big 12's first round output has been horrific in the last 10 years. Terrible. To real MVPs here, I'll take your call in just a second. So that's the framework, just to give you a framework of what the metrics look like right now. Think SEC 360, Big Ten 280, and then the ACC 220. And this is readily available online, so I'm not hitting exact numbers. And then the Big 12 and the Pac-12. And then, of course, the Pac-12 is no more. So we can evaluate last night's selections, and only 32, but those are the 32 most prominent selections. So they do mean more than what's going to happen in the second round or the third or fourth. So not all draft picks are created equal. The first round is the most important, and it's been proven and will continue to be proven that the first round players are the most successful players. Don't give me a bunch of outliers. Yes, they exist. Of course they exist. There are going to be tremendous third round picks and fourth round picks. But the bulk of the impact players going forward came in this first round. And we are going to look at what that looked like last night. So I posted this on X. Please follow me on X. It's easy to do. MarkRogersTV doesn't cost you a penny. Like other things that we offer here, MarkRogersTV. I'm on X. Please follow me. I try to contribute to the conversation of college football. So what we have here is a look at last night's first round. And this is based on 2023 in the Power 5 with the Pac-12 still in existence, because we want to give the Pac-12 its due credit for producing these players. And we can all go back to there being transfers, and a lot of these players, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, all three transfer players, but they were produced to the NFL from the Pac-12 in those schools. The SEC with 11 of 32. And that's a typical year for the SEC. That's usually where they are, somewhere between 9 and 13 in producing the most players by far. The Pac-12 with a respectable, this has to be the best showing from the Pac-12. And it shows that the conference was better in 2022 and 23. And the 3 best programs are coming to the Big Ten, and the 4th should supply some type of value. UCLA, they had a number 1 pick in last night's first round. The Big Ten doubled up by the Pac-12. Look at that, with only 4 selections. The ACC with 4. There you see the Big 12 with 3. The MAC, represented by Toledo and Notre Dame, with 1 each. Okay, now we take these numbers and we move them into the future, really the present and the future, with Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC, with USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon to the Big Ten, with Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado to the Big 12, with, I should have double checked this, I did, Stanford, Cal, and SMU to the ACC. With no impact there, here's what you've got. And does this mean something? Yes. Is it all encompassing? Of course not. It's only 32 selections. It's only 32 players. It's only 1 season. But you know what? You're going to see this repeated over and over and over and over. This is one of these small sample sizes. We see this in poll voting, election voting, and where they can take it, if approached correctly, mathematically in a correct fashion, where you can take a small sample size and you can extrapolate accurately. And I believe you can take this sample size, a small sample size, and you, yes, can extrapolate. This is going to be college football going forward. The SEC 14, the Big Ten 10, the ACC 4, the Big 12 1. Where did that player come from? Where was he? Arizona. That's even a new Big 12 player, 1. And then the others. And of course, Oregon State, we put them in a separate category with Notre Dame as a independent until they find a landing spot. So there's the dominance going forward. Welcome into the Voice of College Football to Real MVPs on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing well. I thank you for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, the gap you talk about is insane between the SEC and Big Ten. If you just added the Big Ten teams, okay, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC, and didn't add Texas and Oklahoma, the SEC would still have more draft picks than the Big Ten.
Yes, by 1.
But still, Mark, that's incredible.
Yeah, we should understand that this is with the SEC delivering 16 teams and the Big Ten with 18. So there's an advantage for the Big Ten. And so the SEC, this is, I should probably done the calculations per team, and then it would be a wider gap. And the ACC with 17 teams going forward. So they've bulked up the quantity, but not the quality. And then the Big 12 with 1 out of 16 teams.
Well, 14 divided by 16 equals 0.875, and 10 divided by 18 equals 0.555, repeating.
Okay.
So well, basically...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah, you said 0.85 versus 0.55, correct?
0.875.
0.875. So roughly 0.88 versus 0.55.
Mm-hmm.
That's significant. Yes.
Right.
Now, that's a very small sample size, but it's if I'm going to be consistent with my argument that the SEC and the Big Ten are way above everyone else, I'll say that until proven otherwise, that the SEC is decidedly above the Big Ten.
Right. Now, can you repeat that? Because, you know, there's people like Moose in the chat and David and all them people who believe there's an argument between the Big Ten and SEC. Can you repeat that for the Big Ten people out there?
Well, here's the simple explanation. The SEC has been the best conference in college football for at least 18 years. And during much of that time, it has been a dominant position. And at the very least, it has been not debatable. So at the weakest that the SEC has been and the strongest that the Big Ten or somebody else has been, it's still been a decided advantage for the SEC. And now, until it's proven otherwise on the field, and it has not been, there is a champion from the Big Ten, but that's one school, that the SEC is still decidedly the best conference in college football. Now, I would not be surprised if things would change or we would have some debate start to form this year. That's possible. But as we stand right here in April of 2024, the SEC is still the best conference. And it's, if somebody wants to call up and debate it, I am certainly willing to take that on.
I hope so, because I'm seeing Moose saying if we're talking talent, it's definitely debatable and it will change. So I'd love to hear him come on and explain that, Mark, because I just want to get in the rationale, because to me, this is like copium or hopium, where people want something to change, so they just try talking themselves into it changing. The Big Ten is a great conference. They're an elite conference. They're going to be deep, and they're going to be fine for years to come. But it's okay being the second best, Mark. I mean, not everybody can be first in life. And the SEC is just that much better. I can't help it.
And so what may happen is if the Big Ten does make it an argument this year, then people can have their argument and we can wage that debate here. And I look forward to that if the results back it up. I don't think the results are going to back it up to the degree that the Big Ten is going to be able to say, oh, we're the best. It's not debatable. That's what it is. I think the Big Ten could play itself into a place where, okay, wow, we've got a real debate here. And then I just don't want to hear from anyone. Mark, you were wrong. You were wrong. No, I wasn't wrong. I am evaluating the situation currently. I am calling it as it is currently and has been for 18 years, at least. That's all I'm doing is reporting and analyzing the sport. That's what I do. I can make some level of prediction. I think that prediction still favors the SEC going forward. Now, Notre Dame, Florida State, if the Big Ten is able to tack on some more, that's different. But as it stands right now, Oklahoma and Texas, at least, I do think that the addition of USC, Oregon, Washington, UCLA is a greater value to the Big Ten than Oklahoma and Texas. But I think it's nominal. It's not decidedly better.
Right. And can some of this be some recency bias? Because Washington, Oregon have had their best years in quite some time this year.
Yeah.
And same with Texas, by the way.
Yeah. Washington's much of a wild card school. They have been all over the map during their recent history. So they can be really, really good. They can be elite, might be a bit of a stretch. I know that they played elite football one year and made the national championship game, so we can call them elite for this past season, but they just lost their quarterback, their coach, everything. This Washington team, you could argue, is the most different, most distinguished team in college football from one year to the next. I would love for somebody to find a team that has a different coach, therefore a different coaching staff, a different quarterback, 2 starters coming back, and they're playing in a different conference. That has to be unprecedented in the history of college football.
Right. To me, Washington reminds me much of a Auburn type team. One year they can win the national championship. The next year they can go 3-9. Yeah. And honestly, Washington this year, I don't expect anything out of them. I think it's much more likely they miss a bowl game than go like 10-2 or 9-3.
Agreed.
So I think a lot of the power of the Big Four is people are looking at it. Well, Oregon was great this year. Well, Washington was great this year. Well, we expect USC to be on the rise, but nobody's looking at it and saying Oregon lost their quarterback. Washington lost their quarterback. USC lost their quarterback. UCLA lost their head coach. So to me, there's a lot of questions around these four new teams, and people just expect the best possible version for all these teams.
True. This UCLA outfit could be just completely non-existent and really adding nothing of substance to the Big Ten.
Right, I know it's crazy, but they legitimately could be the worst team in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, they could be. There's this unknown about Deshaun Foster and building this staff, and they lost a ton of talent, and they really don't have a capable quarterback. He's decent. He's okay, but they've got one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. I don't know where I'm going to land on UCLA when it's all said and done. I tend to not think they're going to come crashing down to that extreme, but as we talk about all the time, there are going to be more teams that are going to increase or decrease by 3 wins more than people know. So they're out there.
Right, and I don't follow UCLA closely enough. We need that Chris guy on here, but I just don't see any excitement or optimism around that program. I mean, their head coach took an offensive coordinating job at an elite school, so.
Well, I think that had more to do with him not liking the changing dynamics of college football and him simply wanting to work with quarterbacks and offenses and call plays and sit in film rooms and be in the lab.
Well, that's fine, but it's still not a good look for your school in general.
No, it's not a good look for the school, but I just don't think that the reality of the situation is that concerning, although maybe the hire that followed that is concerning. Why they didn't go out and get somebody proven. You're entering a new league, a better league. You're entering with 3 schools that are decidedly better than you now. Why would you not want to invest in a big-time coach?
Well, Mark, we talked about it in the past how there's going to be schools that are set out to winning and schools out there to select for the paycheck, and maybe that's the route UCLA's gone down. I remember when we talk about it, UCLA's had financial trouble, so maybe they're just taking the hit in terms of football in order to recover financially for a few years. Do you think that's possible?
Oh, it's possible. It's certainly possible. But if they were forward thinking, that they would realize that they need to reinvest in their program. They're going to make all sorts of big money that they didn't make a year ago and prior to. Now, suddenly, as a full-fledged member of the Big Ten, meaning that they make their split, they don't have to go the Rutgers, Maryland route or even the Oregon, Washington route, that they get a full share from the Big Ten. Wouldn't you think, okay, if you're making $28 or $30 million from a TV contract, and suddenly that goes to $90 million, and then you also probably are going to make more money, I don't think there's any question, in ticket sales when the likes of Penn State and whomever else is coming out there, Wisconsin, are going to flood your stadium, that if you're going to make minimum $60 million more dollars, and maybe that becomes $70 or $80 million, that you say, hey, yeah, let's help our debt, but let's reinvest 10 or 15 or 20 million of that into really good coaches so we can compete and actually be a relevant part of this league going forward.
Well, that seems like a good plan, Mark. I don't know why they're doing that. And I would like to call out David and Moose. They're acting like when I bring up the SEC, I never talk about the bad teams. Mark, South Carolina and Florida had a draft pick, okay? They're bad teams, right? They didn't win any games. They didn't make a bowl, either one of them.
Yeah, it's this, what you are outlining, and I know it's just one player, and there was a player drafted from Toledo, but these schools, they have players drafted every year. What you are getting to actually is look at recruiting rankings. Even when these teams are bad, they have talent. They are mismanaged. They play in a difficult league. There's dysfunction there, but they have talented players. We see this every year in the SEC. If you would go year to year in the SEC, outside of Vanderbilt and maybe some other outlier for that particular year, Arkansas or somebody who doesn't have any draft picks or only has one, you're going to see teams with marginal records that are just as well represented in the draft as teams that are the top 2 or 3 in their league. Kansas State, Oklahoma State, pick your team, Louisville, whomever it is. You will see this every year in the SEC. And you don't see that in other leagues. You don't see that out of Indiana and Rutgers and Northwestern. And somebody can point out an outlier year for those schools. I'm talking about every year. Under 500 SEC teams will produce pretty impressive draft results.
Right. I mean, the SEC is the deepest conference. They have the most talent. And Mark, when everybody plays everybody, somebody's got to lose. So Mississippi State could be the 35th best team in the country, but if they're playing teams that are all significantly better than that, then they're going to lose all them games. And that's what's going to happen, and that's what Minnesota Dave's going to figure out. Minnesota's like, what, the 40th best team in the country? And with their new schedule, they could go, what, 5-7, 4-8?
Yeah.
I mean, and no offense to the Big Ten, but the only schools, legitimate top-tier schools they had is Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. Everyone outside of that's a top 40 team. Now they've added some depth to their conference, okay? I mean, you can argue for Iowa and Wisconsin, but there's a lot of Rutgers and Maryland's and, them type of schools as well.
Sure. When you took that number to 40, though, some of those teams in the top 40 are more like top 15 to 20. Like you didn't even put Oregon in that basket of the top teams in the country.
I was talking about from the old Big Ten.
Oh, from the old Big Ten. Okay.
Yeah, obviously the new Big Ten, your Oregon's going to be in there, USC's going to be in there, Washington could be in there. And my point is, if Minnesota has to face those 3 teams, in addition to a few of the other teams, their record's going to go down the toilet. Instead, they can get 10-2 and 9-3 because they're beating up on the Big Ten West, which is a lot of mediocrity.
Well, for as much as we make out of those 4 teams entering the Big Ten, I'm going to make a general statement, and people are going to be able to dissect schedules and come up with outliers. But this is a general statement that is pretty true to the 80 percentile, that in the Big Ten East, that the Marylands, Indianas, Rutgers, the bottom of that division, their schedules are, from a difficulty standpoint, are going to be about the same, because what they're doing is they don't have to face Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State every year. So they are losing 1 or 2 of those 3 sure losses, and they are replacing them with what are close to sure losses, just in another direction. The place where it gets difficult is that Big Ten Western Division. There were teams that would luck out and not have to play any one of those 3, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, or typically only play one of them. Now, instead, and we did this when the schedule was released for 24 and 25, we looked at the schedule and then we supplanted and said, okay, do all the elimination of the teams that you just play in 2024 and will play in 2025. Let's narrow it down to what the difference in the schedule is. And it's pretty alarming for some of those Big Ten Western Division teams that, let's say you're supplanting Illinois, Northwestern, and Purdue with Oregon, Washington, and Maryland. And it's like, okay, yikes.
Right. And that exactly goes to the depth I'm talking about. And some of these Big Ten West teams are going to get their record beat in, but they're going to argue the same thing I've been arguing, Mark. Well, we're actually better than our record is. So it'll be nice when they see the light at the end of the tunnel this year. I mean, I'm just looking at Minnesota's schedule, for example. I'm just picking on Minnesota because Dave, who's a Minnesota fan, talked about it. They play North Carolina, Iowa, Michigan, USC, Maryland, Penn State, and Wisconsin. They can lose every single one of those games. Every single one.
True.
And they can also be a top 40 team in the country.
True.
So when people talk about how Florida's really terrible or how South Carolina's really terrible, do they have bad records? Yes. But are they like the 60th or 70th best team in the country? No.
One interesting experiment would be, as we've discussed in the past, and especially with this Super League being proposed, it doesn't seem quite as preposterous as it would be otherwise, but it's not going to happen. It would be great if in the spring they would take a vote among college football fans and ask which team in every conference would you want to go see play in another conference? What is the most intriguing team that there is a lot of difference in opinion about that you would love to see go play in another conference, and go send them there and see how well they do? I would love that. I would love the team that you're talking about. And when I say the team, I'm not talking about a particular team. It changes every year, but that third or fourth to the bottom SEC team go play in the Big 12. I would just find that interesting.
I would too. Now, I wish we had somebody inside of like Vegas or something that can temper with the odds, that could just give us the hypothetical line of what they would be to win their conference. Like if we put Florida in the old Big Ten West, would they be favored to win that conference last year or division? I know it sounds crazy, but they could legitimately have been favored to win the Big Ten West.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Iowa fans don't want to hear this, and I'm not necessarily stating that Florida was better than Iowa, but I'm thinking that Florida is not losing to Penn State, Tennessee, and Michigan, like 92-0?
Yeah, that's crazy. And everybody, remember before that Tennessee game, everybody was basically saying Tennessee was overrated and they shouldn't even been ranked. And it was an SEC conspiracy theory that Tennessee was ranked because they tried to boost up Alabama to put them in the playoffs over Florida State. Do you remember that?
I do.
And how'd that turn out for Iowa? Got beat 35-0.
And I certainly was one that wasn't completely on that bandwagon, but I was questioning Tennessee's resume at that point.
Yeah, 35-0 can't be questioned.
Yeah, once they put that on the board, I was fine with wherever I ranked them to conclude the season. It was around 15 to 18, whatever it was.
The only thing, final thing I'd like to talk about, I know you want to wrap this up, is did you see Florida State and their silly rings they've got? What was Florida State's record last year, Mark?
Oh, no. They actually went and got themselves. Now, these are not ACC championship rings, right? They already received those, I would think.
I don't know what rings they are. I saw a picture of a ring that said 13-0 unconquered.
I've got to look this up.
Somebody want to tell Florida State they did play a game in Georgia. They did play that game. Now their players may not have wanted to play in that game, but it did count on the record book, right, Mark? That game did happen.
That is just nonsense. And it makes you look even worse doing stupid things like that. That's moronic. I can't wait to get to our Florida State guys on Wednesday. I'm going to throw that out there. Not that they need to defend the football team, but I would just like to get their thoughts. I'm certainly going to hammer them to the wall. Yeah, you just look foolish. You look Bush League. You look like you're not a big time program that expects to win championships and sees that as not as a disappointment. It was a great achievement to do what they did, but yeah, all the games count, and they got obliterated the final game.
Yeah, Google it. You pull up a picture. If you just type in Florida State 13-0 ring,
Wow.
yeah, it
Okay.
says literally unconquered. It's got a picture of the state of Florida and it says 13-0, and it has the word champions on top.
Well, if they wanted to claim that they were the champions of Florida, that's fine, although they only played 2 teams, but whatever. That would be something different. Then you would put 2-0 on a ring, and that would be whatever you would want it to be. Yeah. All right, DeReal.
Well, yeah, I just don't like manipulating reality. I know Florida State's going to be out of the ACC tomorrow, Mark, but, that's all I got for you.
Thanks, DeReal. Appreciate it. We are moving along here at the Voice of College Football. Will, we appreciate you calling. If you can hang in right there, but we've got Justin Adams on the line, bringing in Justin from our Nebraska channel here at the Voice of College Football. So you can join Justin and myself every Tuesday at 7 Eastern, 6 Central on the Nebraska channel. Also, Justin's work on the Nebraska channel on a regular basis includes Spring Game Post and, of course, the Big Ten Show. It's right here on YouTube. Just type in the Big Ten Show. Justin, what's going on today?
Not a whole lot. I'm enjoying the conversation, though. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
We can hear you just fine.
Sure. All right, cool. I was enjoying the conference conversations, but I'm a little it started getting into Nebraska, started talking about Nebraska. That's I'll worry about the conference when I guess my team can hold up their end of the bargain when it comes to those things, because I find it hard to argue Big Ten conference and my team's not really doing much to assist in that. But I think this year might be different. So it's like, might as well call in now.
It may be, and we'll dive into that. But I know you're a big NFL guy, so we will connect the two, college and NFL. So we'll start there with the draft, and then I'll let you cut loose on the draft, and then we'll get into the Nebraska spring game for tomorrow. I don't know if you had a chance to see. So I posted these numbers, and just to give indication, and I want to explain to everyone, when there are 32 draft selections, is that like exhaustive research or anything like that? No. But let's understand that this pattern is repeated over and over. If this was the only one of its kind, I wouldn't make a big deal about it, but it gets repeated over and over and over. So those 32 picks by the NFL, the 32 most significant picks in the draft, this is significant data, again, because it just repeats itself over and over. So what we have here, Justin, if you can see that, is that the SEC had 11 selections last night, and the Pac-12 really had its best first round in forever. I don't know what the year is, but it's a long, long time. And that speaks to the Pac-12 being awful for a long time, for about a decade, and then having 2 really nice seasons the last 2 years. And that's indicated right there, because the Pac-12 has been nowhere in that range in a long time. You see the Big Ten with 4, the ACC with 4, and on down the line. So then my point being that, and usually the Big Ten is much stronger than what it showed this year. They tied, the Big Ten did, the SEC last year for the most picks in the first round. It was like 9-9 or 10-10. But if you look at, so that's based on the power structure and the format of college football in 2023. But if you move everyone to their conferences starting in 2024, then that's what it becomes.
Right.
And this, again, I'm making a big deal out of 32 picks because the trends are just repeat themselves over and over. This is an indication of what the SEC and the Big Ten are going to do to the rest of college football going forward once those schools move to those conferences.
Correct. And I mean, it's always been an indication. If people look at that, the most successful conferences, of course, are going to have the most talent coming out of them. And I think this just further shows, like kind of like you mentioned before, like, yes, while the SEC may be, at the top of the sport in terms of just overall, that gap has been closed a lot more than people realize. And in one breath, you got to look at it couple of different ways. You also have to look at what kind of talent are these teams bringing in, so let's say, for instance, Washington season, and people are thinking of that maybe as like a flash in the pan type of season. Well, to dictate whether or not that's going to be a trend, because you got to, as you said before, it's an outlier for the Pac-12 to have that many teams in the first round. Well, if that's an outlier, then we're going to need to see that consistently to be able to tell the strengths of the conferences, because will Washington reload with that same level of talent, because we know a lot of the SEC teams will. And so there's that kind of angle with it. But for the most part, yeah, I think the Big Ten is a lot closer to the SEC than people in the SEC want to admit. And I don't think it's one of those things where it's like, oh, the Big Ten has to accept second best. I don't think that's the case, or else the SEC probably would not be in any kind of joint working capacity in any way with the Big Ten if they thought that they could just squash them and they could still run the show. I think they see it's in their best interest to work with them for that reason. But yeah, everything that we're seeing is more and more indicating that direction. So I'm actually happy you put that together, because I was curious on that. I wasn't able to fully follow the entirety of the draft as much as I wanted to. It was finally nice for a change. The Texans, like, I'm usually have to be locked into the draft, but for once my team's not completely terrible, and so we didn't have a first round pick, so it was nice for a change.
So yeah, that's something that I do every year. I'm locked in on the NFL draft and how it relates to college football and the power structure of college football. And so I'll be continuing to add up. And then now, again, with all these teams moving conferences, you got to do two different
correct
sets of data, because I still think it's relevant to look back and how good was the Pac-12 last year, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Just your thoughts. I don't want to pin you down too much on the NFL draft, since it doesn't sound like you took much in, but I do know you're an NFL guy.
I did actually recap a lot of it. I just wasn't able to sit down and go over stuff like that and really put together anything in regards to the draft like I normally would.
So I'll let you cut loose on this, whether you want to take an NFL angle or a college angle, whatever. Just what were some of the most significant selections and trends in the first round for you?
Well, so for me, right, like the Texans, like I want the Texans to go get a defensive back. So the way the board worked out for us is perfect. Like the defensive backs were just falling like crazy. Very strong offense heavy board. It tends to do that sometimes. 2021, I think we had, 3 DBs selected in the top 10 picks, if not 2. It was Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley, something like that. And now you barely have any DBs taken in the first round. And so it's one of those things where it's fun to watch these sometimes just to see what the trend tends to be in terms of how the draft goes and where that works into people's boards. But I think overall, the biggest surprise selection of the day naturally was, everybody was talking about the Falcons going get Penix. The Falcons getting Penix after signing Kirk Cousins to that contract doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a couple of reasons. They have other needs naturally. Secondly, you have Kirk Cousins on that contract, and whether or not you think he's the guy for the 4 years or not, you still got to look. I don't think what people take into account is sometimes college quarterback age coming into the league, because you got to understand last year, I think Hendon Hooker was, by the time he came to the league, was going to be the same age as Lamar Jackson, or near the same age as Lamar Jackson. Michael Penix is 2 years older than CJ Stroud. And so a lot of people don't take those things into account as the age of these quarterbacks when they're talking about, it's a young quarterback who's going to be able to sit for a while. Well, by the time Kirk Cousins' contract is up, he's 28. And then all of a sudden you don't have that rookie contract to take advantage of, to where you can build that, that stable of that team around him, i.e. what the Texans are doing. Because when you have to pay your quarterback, you're in the Cowboys situation where you have no salary cap left, because you had to fork out that money to your franchise QB. So, I think that could be an all-time historically bad pick. No knock on Penix. It has nothing to do with Penix. It is 100% due to what the Falcons did and the move they made there. And it's just, I think you do that maybe with a younger quarterback. If you find a guy who's 21, okay, maybe. But yeah, that one made zero sense to me. But I did love I didn't like Xavier Worthy going to the Chiefs. I do like Xavier Worthy. Most people do, but I just thought the Bills trading out of that and then them picking up Xavier Worthy was kind of crazy, considering the Bills could also use a weapon. But yeah, It was very chalk early on, and then after a while, you kind of got you got a run of offensive linemen. So a lot of it's funny to watch the teams that actually need offensive linemen, but their fans get mad when they actually draft an offensive lineman because it's not a wide receiver or running back. It just the whole draft atmosphere is funny to me. But yeah, all-time bad pick by the Falcons there, in my opinion. And this could come back, and I could be wrong. But if I'm wrong, we're all wrong because we all thought it was a bad pick. So.
Yeah, most of the booing that you hear and the fan response is they don't even know the player that was drafted. They have no idea. They just, they knew who they thought the star was that should have been drafted, the college star or the position, like you say. They don't. We can all acknowledge that the offensive line is maybe the most important unit on the field, but nobody wants to see their team draft an offensive lineman, or a lot of people don't, because they don't. They want the sexy pick.
Yep. They want that nice new cute quarterback. They want that nice new wide receiver. Yeah. That's why even defensive players, like, people don't get as excited for defensive players, but there's something about having a lockdown secondary to me that is the most beautiful thing on the planet. I love a secondary that can just lock everything down. That is fun to watch for me.
Got Justin Adams here. You can join he and I. We're here every Tuesday talking Nebraska football with all of you. Nebraska Live. It's on the Huskers channel, so please join us there. 7 Eastern, 6 Central. Justin, Sonny Verma with the Big Ten show. It's right here on YouTube as well. Let's talk Huskers. Spring game coming up on Saturday. So your thoughts about what you would like to see there?
So I think the biggest thing that everybody, of course, wants to see from Nebraska and our fan base is turnovers limited, fumbles, interceptions, the whole nine. So the outside of the obvious ones, we want to see, of course, the improvement in the line play. You want to see the limited on turnovers, but there's a couple of different factors on the field that we kind of can pay attention to, and kind of it more so to do with the fact that this year Rule's team is kind of looking more like what he wants it to, as opposed to last year, where throughout the spring and then into the season, the injuries started to pile up in the season. And what we saw over the course of the season was kind of a patchwork version of what last year's team was even supposed to look like. And so a lot of those players that came in and kind of got trial by fire, being thrown into the middle part of the season as a true freshman and being able to go out there and start and produce, Nebraska losing 8 of its 11 starters by week 4. You kind of start to see some of these positionless, defense and offensive styles that they want to run with the 3-3-5 with Tony White. You have a lot of secondary movement. So you'll have your stockier, your bigger, cornerbacks that can rotate up into safety. Right now, the cornerback 2 position is in the air. I believe it will be Bly Hill. Bly Hill transferred into Nebraska, was our lowest rated transfer this offseason. However, one of the ones that I'm most excited about. So we get to see Bly Hill in that cornerback rotation and see if that opens up some of these guys. Like, you got your Malcolm Hartzog to move over to safety. And then also that can free up some of those safeties to move down to linebacker. And when I say move, I don't necessarily mean move position completely. Like, Hartzog is a full position move to safety, most likely. But I mean, just in terms of the way they shuffle these guys around in the 3-3-5, you have your Jack, you have your Rover, and those guys are really kind of slot all over the place. But the way the front of the 3-3-5 gives you so many different looks, you have, some of your linebackers slide down to edge. You'll have some of your edge rushers coming up into the linebacker slot. So it's throwing a bunch of different looks at you, and it's throwing a bunch of different fronts at you to kind of cause confusion. And so I think this year, the defense, of course, is the most stocked in terms of talent, returning talent goes, the defense being the stronger unit last year. So we'll start to get to see some of those get finalized. We have guys like Stephon Thompson, who I've talked about a lot on the channel, coming over from Syracuse, formerly played with Tony White over at Syracuse when he coached there. One of the first guys to start there in 10 years in terms of true freshman. Had a career high in sacks in tackles his first game out. Had a great season, finished second on the team in tackles before he got injured behind a guy who ultimately went to the NFL. And then, after he came back from the ACL injury, was in a green contact jersey for the entirety of spring, was still able to come back and, have to kind of get his reps back while he was playing live action on the field, which not easy. Still ended up with 50 some odd tackles. So defense and offense, starting to see some dispositionless stuff. And then I'll just, before I ramble too much, I'll let you ask any more questions you have before I roll over to offensive side in case you got questions on that.
Well, beyond the Huskers faithful, tuning into this game is going to be a lot of people curious to see Dylan Raiola cut loose for the first time, because not a lot of people are on the huddle film and looking at high school prospects. So for a lot of people, this is going to be the first chance to see, okay, what is all the hype about?
Correct. And see, there it is. Like, I'm a defense guy. My first thought, I go straight to the secondary. Raiola, yes. The story that people want to talk about is the quarterback room at Nebraska, of course. Last year with Jeff Sims, Heinrich Harburg, Chubba Purdy wasn't very pretty, to put it, a dad joke for you, just for the crowd there. I have my 2 children behind me. So, but the thing with Raiola is I know a lot of people are, a lot of people that are, I don't want to say anti-Nebraska, but a lot of people who are just kind of like dismissive of Nebraska, the ones that sit there and say they're irrelevant, which is ironic, but their argument here is that, like, okay, and part of it makes sense, right? The whole true freshman being able to start and be successful and be, what he's touted to be his first season, right? He's going to make mistakes, right? We're not throwing it out here like he is the second coming of, Peyton Manning out here. We can say he has the potential to be very, very good. But what people don't understand is when you look at Dylan Raiola in terms of his talent, his maturity, and what's led him up to this point, Raiola has spoken time and time again about how Nebraska was the place that he always wanted to be in his heart, right? And so the whole him being here and then, potentially moving and all that stuff, throwing all those arguments out and just putting it onto football. What he does on the football field is why he's graded what he is in his recruiting class. And so what we've seen over this camp is them really just try to get him more in tune with the decision making and being able to pick up on, like I said before, different fronts, different type of looks, and different types of schemes on the defensive side of the ball. And what they've really been trying to do, Satterfield has spoken to this, and Glenn Thomas has spoken to this, is they're really trying to make them make the play that they are supposed to make within the system when everything goes wrong. Now, let me put that in a little bit more perspective. So essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that no matter what, they go to their next step in their progression, no matter what the play breaks down to, right? So there's always a plan B, there's a plan C. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to not only get them a little bit scatterbrained out there and kind of throwing a bunch of different stuff at them to confuse them, but at the same time, they're trying to make them operate within the confines of the offense. And so what that's going to do is it's going to put a little bit of more of a system and a mechanism in place for a young guy like Raiola to not just have to free flow and do too much of it on his own, which is in turn going to help him, I think, be able to focus on just his next read, his next move. And I think Glenn Thomas coming over from Pittsburgh and having that quarterback mind is really what's going to make the difference there, and what's going to make this a lot easier on Dylan. And so what I think when we get out there we'll see first off, it's going to be very vanilla. So they're not going to be throwing a ton at him defensively. So we're probably going to see some really good throws, but we're probably also going to see some really bad ones. Might see an interception or two. And that's just part of the nature of the beast. CJ Stroud was talking about last night how, one of the things that when he came in, he was like, after my second week, he said, I was beat up. I was like, I can't do this, because it played the Colts the second week, right? But what he said then, he's like, I realized that everybody out there is stronger than me and faster than me. So what I got to do is I got to get to my spot. I'm either up and out or back and around. It's like a NBA shooter, right? Getting to their spot. And so he found that out by having those mistakes happen and having, he got beat up those first 2 games. He didn't play very well those first 2 games, but that week 3 was when he started to turn that corner. But that's what I don't want people to just overreact. What I'm saying is I want people to overreact if Dylan Raiola gets out there and he struggles, because he needs to struggle. And if any coaching staff is going to want to make him struggle in a game like this, it is Rhule staff, because he is all about making practice and making things as difficult as they can on them. That way they're better polished and better sharpened mentally for the game. And so I don't necessarily think it's going to. I hope people aren't disappointed when it's not necessarily showcased, but they might get out there and showcase a little bit. You got Daniel Kaelin as well, the other true freshman in this class. Now, Daniel Kaelin's story, of course, whenever Raiola said he was going to go to Georgia, Daniel Kaelin decommitted from Missouri to come to Nebraska. Then while Raiola ended up committing to Nebraska, Daniel Kaelin stayed and was like, I want to be here. And so he is very, very loved within the fan base too. Rightfully so. He's a unique kid in today's transfer portal age, where you got to sit behind a true freshman 5-star quarterback as a 4-star, and you're going to go in there and you're going to do it anyways, and you're going to use it to make yourself better. And so with with Kaelin, Kaelin might, let's prepare for the instance that Kaelin might look better in the spring game, which he absolutely might, because Kaelin is very, very talented. And we'll push Raiola, don't get me wrong, but there's a reason Raiola is the way he was rated, and Kaelin is the way he was rated. And right now at the same point, they're on the same development structure, on the same team. And so the odds of Kaelin being able to beat out Raiola, probably very, very low. Heinrich Harburg, of course, has made leaps this offseason. However, he's just a little bit behind the curve in terms of development goes. So going to be very exciting to see from this quarterback room what we get. Heinrich Harburg could end up with the best game out there because he has the most experience. But Raiola and Kaelin, we're going to see a lot of the deep pass now that we have a couple guys who can throw the deep ball accurately, and it'll set up a lot of what this offense was supposed to look like last year, which was Marcus Satterfield is huddling, getting big and getting physical, and establishing the run so that way you can set up the deep pass. We didn't get to see that at all last year because there was no deep pass game. And so we'll start to kind of see that offense look as they want it to, see some of these tight ends move around and see what these quarterbacks got for us.
Nebraska spring game Saturday in Lincoln. And as soon as it's over, Justin's going live. So join Justin on the Nebraska channel for post game after the Huskers go against the Huskers, the red and white game.
Yes, sir.
So here we go, Justin. You mentioned the term relevance, and then it's ironic that people bring up and attack Nebraska for being relevant. And what Justin's speaking to is obviously, if Nebraska is not relevant, why are you bringing them up? So on the field, they have not been relevant in terms of being some kind of factor in the conference, going to a decent bowl game since 2016. They've not been relevant toward being a serious conference competitor since they went to their last Big Ten championship game.
Yep.
Now, so let's stick to what's going on in the field, because I would never discount Nebraska's relevance as a national power in terms of their brand. But we'll stick to the field and what Matt Rhule's trying to do, what he's building here. So to the Nebraska critic that says, I saw the same team last year. I saw the same team making the same mistakes in the clutch. They were oh so close, but they kept tripping up in the fourth quarter. We could list off the number of games: Maryland, Iowa, Wisconsin, etc. Why is it going to be different with Matt Rhule? What are we seeing? And of course, there's no way for you to back this up until they step on the field and start to post W's next year. But what are you seeing out of Matt Rhule's approach and his program versus Scott Frost?
Well, the first thing is accountability. And there's an actual foundation being built. Whereas before with Scott Frost, we felt like Scott Frost was building a foundation of something. However, we never were kind of indicating that he was never really open as to how this plan was supposed to work. And, we would get little indications of like different areas that they would be hitting for recruiting, and we're trying to send the team this direction. But now with Matt Rhule, what we're starting to see and hear in the way the coaches and the players speak, we're starting to hear some of these year-over-year growths. Like last year, for instance, the players were talking about how they were still kind of learning the staff since they were new, and the coaches were still learning the players. Last year, the coaching staff was very much on the side of coach taking accountability for a lot of what's going on. Now, the way Matt Rule operates is he tightens things up in year 2. And there's a reason why he makes the year 2, year 3 jump that we're kind of being able to start to see come to fruition this year now, is he sets a foundation in there and he sets a standard in there. And then the first year, the coaches and they adhere and hold everybody to that standard. Everything is done the way they want it. And they run a very tight ship, a very physical style of practice. They do the winter mat drills where they make them get points on things that they don't enjoy doing. Like, let's say they don't want to go to the women's basketball game, or let's say they don't want to go to the men's basketball game or whatever, just for the people who are going to jump on me for specifying women. They get points for going to do things that they don't want to do. And that there innately shows kind of who's the leaders and who aren't, who's going to make the things that they don't want to do make them fun for them. So that way they'll go do them because they're a leader and they're supposed to be out there and they're supposed to be doing these things. And he says, if you get it to where you can do the things that you don't want to do, then it'll be easy to do the things you love to do, and there's systems in place that we're learning and hearing about. And it comes through with the way the coaches are talking this year. Cause this year it's like, it's less about us and more accountability on them. The coaches now are coaching and policing the other players and little things like that. And so with Matt Rule and the normal operation where he does stuff in Baylor and Temple, and I know people are saying, like, well, that was at Baylor and Temple. Well, Baylor and Temple are in much worse situations than Nebraska even is now. So he's coming over with a talent stable that was, way above what he had even over there, with way more resources than he had over there. But not only that, he's set a plan in place. He structured this plan. And in year 2, we've already seen progress towards that plan. I think with Scott Frost, we really didn't see any progress. We were excited about certain recruits. We're excited about certain names. We're excited about this certain style that we were going to finally see on the field, with Scott Frost and all that stuff. We believed in him as a person. And I think with Matt Rule, we're starting to believe in the process more than, we believe in Matt Rule, but that's because we're starting to see the process take shape, and we believe in his process. And so now we're starting to see the fruits of the labor, and we're starting to see some of these things come to fruition. And then, like you said, though, until we see it on the field, people aren't necessarily going to be convinced. However, they should know that everything that's being done behind the scenes is completely different. They even got analysts. When Matt Rule came over, he had analysts that he hired in the state of Texas. And I'm talking like hundreds of different like recruiting kind of coordinator roles and stuff like that from the top high school coaches in Texas. And already that's paid dividends, because now Texas and Florida outside of Nebraska are two most the states with the most commitments in our class. And those are the 2 states with the most offers going out next season. And now we're starting to see guys like Michael Terry, the number 1 athlete in the state of Texas, will be at the spring game this weekend. We wouldn't have had stuff like that before. We have a loaded visitor class this weekend, and it's just everything is being done differently. It's just, like I said, one person we believed in because who he was as a person and who he was to the program as a player. And now Rule, we're starting to believe into what he preaches and what he, the philosophy that he brings. And that is making us find confidence in him, because we're seeing it actually, we're seeing the results play out over the course of this spring.
All right, Justin, what's going on at the Big Ten show?
Yeah. So we got some program overviews coming back up for y'all. Probably have a spring recap from a few teams. May get Jeffrey the Greek on, do some Iowa stuff. And, we'll try to have as many spring game recaps as we can from fans of our reporters and fans of your favorite teams. So that way y'all can get an unbiased take. And I try to be as unbiased as possible on there. Trust me. I put Ferentz above Matt Rule in my coach power ranking. So you got to give me credit. All right. Got to give me a little bit of credit. But yeah, slide on over there. We'll have the program overviews coming for the second half of the league. we got half of the program overviews up already, where we're going through all the football programs and stuff like that. So,
all right. And then once again, everyone, join Justin after the Nebraska spring game on Saturday over on our Huskers channel. It's easy to find, Voice of College Football Nebraska. And real quick, you can follow everything that Justin does. Bam, right there on X. There he is. Look at that crew.
Hey, that's the fam right there.
Nice.
And that's me with my obnoxious chain. I have a guy in Houston. He makes me these chains, and I said, "Make me the biggest, most obnoxious chain you can make." And he was like, 18 by 18. I was like, "Let's do it."
There it is.
Yep. So if y'all see that chain,
big guns to be able to carry that thing.
It's a load on your neck after a while. That thing, that little plastic chain ain't comfortable. But if y'all see that chain out there in Nebraska for the Colorado game, that that's me.
All right, it's Justin with the Big Ten show right here on YouTube, and also, of course, he holds it down for us on the Nebraska channel, the Voice of College Football. See him after the spring game. And Justin, we appreciate you stopping by, man.
Appreciate it, Mark. Go Big Red.
All right, we will keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got a call coming in from our buddy Will ND. Will, we appreciate your patience, sir.
Hey, Mark, what's going on?
What is going on? What's going on with you?
Well, we were talking about JJ in the chat, and I'm like, I just don't know. Like, JJ doesn't scream like NFL star quarterback, but like he's going to the Vikings with Kevin O'Connor, with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones at the running back. Like, I feel like he's got a good situation there, so he could be successful. But like, to me, he doesn't like scream NFL star. Of course, like John and Moose are all saying like JJ's the best, and like JJ's a great college quarterback. The guy's a winner. He won a national championship, won 2 Big Ten championships, beat their biggest rival, who they've been losing to twice in a row. So he accomplished a lot at Michigan, but he didn't scream NFL star. But I think he could succeed with the Vikings.
Yeah, I think he can succeed. I would tend to believe. Now, of course, we know that if JJ McCarthy's a bust, that should not be a surprise to anyone. And if he turns out to be a Pro Bowl, all-pro quarterback, however you want to phrase it, one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, maybe some people would be surprised by that. I would not. So we know that the variance for all of these players is super substantial. Where they land, especially as a quarterback, is important. He seems to be going, as you just outlined very briefly, but very succinctly, a very good situation in Minnesota. So I'm leaning pretty heavily toward him being a successful NFL quarterback.
Drake May, I'm not sure about after going to the Patriots, man. They're a mess. I mean, they're not the team that they were when Belichick and Brady were in their prime.
I was never impressed with Drake May. Now, I say this in a way that I want to separate what is obvious about Drake May. There's a reason that everyone is high on him, and he was drafted that high. I'm just talking about in the occasions that I watched Drake May. I think about the ACC championship game against Clemson. I think about a number of other performances against several teams, many teams, and yeah, he's a really good player. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, I'm not the guy to make an evaluation on a guy that I've not seen, and I don't watch these guys in college thinking about the NFL, thinking how does this translate. I evaluate them more as college players.
I mean, he threw the tough throws that you're gonna have to make in the NFL more, just because like he was having to keep up because their defense wasn't good, and he was having to win the games on his own, really, because his O-line wasn't elite.
Well, getting back to JJ, you're right. So through the majority of the 2022 season, Michigan was so run heavy, and then late in the season, when they wanted to hit some deep balls, he didn't. He was long on most of his deep throws, which, if you're talking about arm strength, it's better to be long than short, but you're never going to complete anything if you're too long. And yeah, did he throw one long pass against Ohio State? yeah, the guy was a high school quarterback, should complete that throw. So, JJ, I thought was pretty impressive in the playoff game against TCU after he threw pick sixes and got them in the hole by 18 or 21 points. He led a comeback. Those Ohio State games, he obviously was supported by a great defense and a strong running game. And this last year, he threw 20 passes in that game, but he threw one ridiculous throw for a touchdown that you're not going to see too many passes with a higher difficulty rate than what he did, because he had to sidestep the rush and drop his arm at the last split second with the defender in his face, with a lineman right there. And then he threw it probably 2 inches over a helmet and just perfectly for a touchdown. So it's hard for me to get past the arm talent. And so yeah, I'm leaning in JJ's favor there.
Yeah, I think that the Bears, I don't know if I totally trust the Bears, but they seem like they're doing a good job building around Caleb Williams. So it'll be interesting to see if the Bears can finally become good, competent on the offensive side of the ball. They had the good defenses when I first watched the NFL with Urlacher, but Cutler was never impressed me too much. And they had Devin Hester, but
it'll be interesting to see if Caleb Williams can play more like an NFL quarterback. There's a lot with him of this. I'm in the pocket, and then I turn my back and I roll out because I got to get out of that pocket. Or he does a lot of this backpedaling where he's quicker than the defensive line in front of him, the guys that are chasing him, and he backpedals, and then he's able to. He's just all over the place. Offensive linemen have no idea where he is a lot of the time, and he improvises, and it's fun to watch. It's effective. I don't know if it's going to be effective at the next level, consistently doing that.
Yeah, we'll see what they do in Chicago. I just don't understand why the Falcons picked Michael Penix because they just signed Kirk Cousins and they didn't tell Kirk about drafting Penix. It just seems like a mess there. But he's going to need the O-line to play very well for him to be successful.
How old is Kirk Cousins? He's got to be. He started in 2011 was his first year in the NFL.
I believe it was 2012.
2012. So he's got to be 34, 35.
35.
And they just signed him to a contract. They got to be thinking that he's going to be their quarterback for the next 2 to 3 years. And I know that the quarterback class is not looking pretty for this next year. But I got to think that you would bank on there being somebody available the next year, and that you would rather have a capable backup. Yeah. I don't know what else they need. They're obviously not that good of a team because they haven't made the playoffs in a while. So, yeah, that seems like a wasted. Well, it's boom or bust. If he turns out to be a great quarterback, he might be 30 years old before he is. But that is what you're riding on, is him coming through. But if he doesn't, then there's a whole lot of other holes they could have patched.
Yeah, one thing that will be fun for sure is Marvin Harrison Jr. playing with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, it was mentioned on here by Quentin Crisco, who breaks down the draft, that Malik Neighbors is a higher end possibility at wide receiver to do special things than Marvin Harrison Jr., but that Marvin Harrison Jr. just his entire college career just distinguished himself as the guy that not to in any way look past his athleticism, but is going to run the routes correctly. The ceiling is high, but it's more about the floor being almost, non-existent, because he is just, with his work ethic and his skill set, that he's just a ready-made starter in the NFL, and he may not have top ridiculous end ability or potential, but you'll give that up for what's as close to a sure thing as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of Larry Fitzgerald for sure. Not just because he's going to the Cardinals. But.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm happy that Joe Alt made top 5. I thought he was going to fall to the Titans, but Jim Harbaugh got him.
Yeah, I saw a post today from your buddy Brian Driscoll.
Oh, yeah.
About the Notre Dame's dominance along the offensive line in the pros. And it is an extremely impressive statistic when you see 14, I think was the number, 14 or 15 all-pro selections out of Notre Dame offensive linemen, and the next was 3.
Harry Houston was a great offensive line coach. I mean, hopefully Joe Rudolph can at least be close to being as successful as Coach Houston, but of course, Joe Moore was the offensive line coach under Lou Holtz, and Harry Houston with Kelly in 1 year with Freeman. I mean, those two are 2 of the best of all time. Can't go wrong with drafting any of their O-linemen.
Who else is going to show up for Notre Dame next?
Cam Hart and Blake Fisher will be probably drafted tonight. Cam Hart's a cornerback. And then Blake Fisher's a lineman.
Sure.
Tackle.
So there it is for Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And so O-line U seems to be in order for the Irish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just got to get the skill players to be playing well at receiver. Hopefully should be a big improvement in that this season. Quarterback as well, but I'm confident. And see what I've seen from CJ Carr, that the Irish are definitely heading in the right direction with that.
Yeah, so Will, after you saw the spring game, and then with everything else you took in about what happened during the spring 15 practices, what needs to be worked on? Where does Notre Dame stand? All of that.
Honestly, I'm a little worried about the offensive line just because of like who we lost and the guys that. I mean, obviously they're new, but I was expecting them to be a little more competitive. I know a lot of the D linemen are like 5th and 6th year players, so that makes sense.
And Riley Leonard, there's no concern about his availability.
No, he'll be able to play during the season. He's been mostly practicing on throwing, so it's kind of a blessing in disguise with Riley, because that's his one weakness is the throwing. And Coach Guidugly's been working with him to make sure he'll be ready for the A&M game, ready to be able to throw the deep ball.
Well, Will, as soon as I can find the time and gather the information, we're going to size up all-time program statistics. So we'll see where Notre Dame lands on all of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it should be at least top 5, right?
Should be.
Yeah.
Should be.
I think probably – in terms of consistency, Ohio State's the best. But in terms of, like, peaking, teams at their peak, I think USC's number 1. And then Bama's kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
So I think those will probably be the top 3. But maybe Notre Dame will be ahead of one of those.
Where do you stand on how much to count and recognize championships from before we can find any film on these games?
Well, you can find if you look hard, you can find film of those Frank Leahy teams. You can. Like I've looked up you can't hear any noise, but you can see like Angelo Bertelli throwing the ball around. So that's really so now we're really not counting the Newt Rockne teams with the 4 horsemen.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just asking the question.
I mean, There's a line there that, I mean, you can move the line wherever you want. Like, you can move the line to, like, I guess Jim Brown, I guess, would be the modern era of Jim Brown, and on would be, I guess, integration. I guess you can make the line there if you want.
Well, if I had the database to do it, I would throw out any year and just see, okay, what are all the numbers since 1985 or 1995 or 1936 when the poll era started? But I don't have that kind of database. So we're going to add up everything, and the 1901 games are going to count just as much as the 2023 games. They're all going to add up the same. The only thing that I state, and I was having this argument with a certain fan base the other day, is when they said, oh, they don't count. Why don't they count? I didn't say that they didn't count. I just said that I don't care about them. Like, it's hard for me to get too excited about games 120 years ago. Now, if this was a different sport, so if we could go 100 years into the future, it's not about the length of time, because the validity of the games being played in 2023 in 21-23, I think is going to be much different than we're talking about just the outset of the sport and these teams playing club teams and high school teams, and it was just kind of a free for all, and just the number of games wasn't standardized, just none of that.
All right, here's the line that I'm doing, Mark.
Okay.
So Rose Bowl started doing games every year from 1916, I guess, onward. So that's what I would do. I would do the line when the Rose Bowl first started becoming a yearly fixture. I think
Why does that matter?
It's just, I mean, it shouldn't matter, but like I feel like if we're talking about like Ivy League teams like winning it, I don't know. That's just the line where I was thinking, but
yeah, again, there are all sorts of valid lines, and anytime you just pick an even year, I don't think that's a valid line, because there's nothing special about 50 years versus 49 years. But the World War II or the poll era or desegregation, I think that's actually the most valid, but it didn't all happen at one time. It would be easier if in 1965, boom, everything was desegregated, but that's not the case. There were players.
Archie Manning's teams were all white.
Yeah, and 15 years earlier, there were, as you mentioned, the likes of Jim Brown and others playing in the North and playing on their teams. So there is no line of demarcation there.
Yeah.
All right, Will. Anything else?
No, that's about it, Mark. Just thanks so much for the talk in the draft, and then the portal stuff. Got to be. Are you going to continue doing it all through the off season, or is there going to be a?
Well, the portal stops on April 30th, so I think we will continue that into next week.
Okay, I didn't know that.
All right, Will.
All right,
appreciate it. Thanks.
Appreciate you having me on.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. It's the Big Ten Live Show. We come your way every Friday, typically at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, but it is the NFL Draft, so we thought we would go on early. We got Marty Leap stopping by from Penn State Rivals. Marty, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
Oh, I can't complain. NFL draft weekend is always one of the better weekends of the spring, because you kind of get that little taste of football. It always comes right after spring games, and it falls in a good spot on the calendar to kind of wet your palate a little bit until things start to rev back up again here in a couple of months.
Well, we anticipated a big series of NFL drafts for Penn State, especially on defense, and we got that last night with a couple off the board. Well, although one was, of course, the offensive lineman. So your thoughts about Penn State's early run at the NFL draft?
Yeah, nothing surprising. I think most people, obviously, Olu Fashanu has been projected to be not just a first-round pick, but a top 15 pick like he was for quite some time now. And, as this previous season progressed and into the combine and pro day, that sort of thing, it looked like Chop Robinson was, pretty close to a lock to be a first-round pick too. And yeah, I think it's a great fit for Chop, first and foremost. I think the kind of defense Miami runs, he's going to fit really well in that scheme as a pass rusher. And I also think, having Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb there too, when healthy, two of the premier pass rushers in the league to learn from, is not a bad thing either. And you look at Olu with the Jets. I mean, the Jets, obviously, it's easy to make the Jets the punchline of a lot of jokes. But, they signed Tyrone Smith this offseason. He's one of the best offensive tackles of this era. So having his brain to pick for Olu is going to be a nice thing. And I think one thing with Olu Fashanu is his ceiling may not be quite as high as a Joe Alt, but I think his floor, because his pass blocking is already very, very, very good. Due to that, I think his floor is very high. And if he can come around a little bit more as a run blocker, you're talking about one of the best tackles in football. And even if that run blocking doesn't improve as much as you hope, like I said, his pass blocking skills are already so good that floor is so high on him. I think that's a good fit with the Jets. And, it's a good opportunity for him to wear with Tyrone Smith there. He probably won't have to be completely thrown to the fire, but will have an opportunity to play early, learn from a really good veteran, and kind of be able to be eased into things, which is very similar to how it was at Penn State, where first year or two kind of, easing into things, then took over, became an All-American. So I think both are drafted to really good situations. And with Chop especially, he's probably set up to probably really make an impact as a rookie this year.
So on to 2024, not just what you saw in the blue and white game, but if you put that together with everything that you gathered from the other 14 practice sessions, what are your highlights from Penn State spring football?
I think this defense is still going to be really good. I mean, you lose Manny Diaz. We just talked about Chop Robinson. You lost a lot in the secondary. Over the course of the next 2 days, you're going to see Kalen King and Johnny Dixon and Daquan Hardy drafted. But this defense is still really good, Mark. They bring a lot back. Abdul Carter at defensive end is going to be a lot of fun. In the spring game, he was not blockable. Now, Penn State did not have Drew Shelton, who's the projected starting left tackle, was out due to injury. So that was probably a bit of a factor, but they could not block him coming off the edge. It's going to be a lot of fun watching the defensive end. The defensive line as a whole should be really, really good again. Denai Dennis Sutton, Jamil Lyons, Zane Durant, all guys who had big springs. And even the secondary, as much as they lost, KJ Winston and Jalen Reed, if it wasn't for the duo at Ohio State, would be easily the best starting safety duo in the Big Ten. Zakee Wheatley, who's their third safety, may have had the best spring of anybody on the defense. So I think with Tom Allen, and I mean, yeah, you lost Manny Diaz, but Tom Allen is no joke when it comes to coaching defense, as fans of the Big Ten know. I think you're going to see a lot of a third safety set as kind of their base with Zakee Wheatley in there. I still think this defense is going to be really good. And on offense, it's a lot of the same. Who's going to step up a receiver? Obviously, they lost Keandre Lambert-Smith with the transfer portal, as I'm sure we'll talk about. But I will preface that by saying there are a lot of people in that program who probably aren't sad to see him go for a lot of different reasons that have nothing to do with football and on the field. But I think Andy Kotelnicki is very innovative as an offensive coordinator. And at Kansas, he ran a lot of 12 and 22 personnel. And with Penn State's tight end and running back rooms, that's what they're built for. True freshman Quentin Martin, who was by some services a 5-star running back out of the Pittsburgh area, who was an early signing in January, battled some injuries this spring, was able to play in the spring game, and looked every bit of the borderline 5-star recruit. So J1 Slider just continues to churn them out at running back. And, I'll be curious to see if we see some two running back set between him and obviously Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, the big two. I think we might see some of Martin out in the slot, just get him the ball in space, same with Singleton, and let them make guys miss. So, yeah, I think coming out of spring, if you're a Penn State fan, you feel really, really good about this defense. You feel really good about the running game. And, you're still concerned about the passing game, but I think what Kotelnicki does well with attacking safeties and highlighting his running backs and highlighting his tight ends will help kind of offset some questions in the wide receiver room. But ultimately, I think with this team, it's going to come down to Drew Allar. If he can take that step, you're a playoff team. You're a playoff team if Drew Allar takes that step, especially with the schedule. The schedule's not overly challenging. And if Drew doesn't take the step, it's probably another frustrating season where Penn State's left just on the doorstep, as they've been seemingly every year for almost the last 10 years now.
I know you have to get sick of hearing about that. I'm not going to bring it up during this conversation. It's April. It's the NFL draft, transfer portal, all that other business. A lot to get to before we start talking playoff projections and so forth, and why can't Penn State get off the deck? Although I did see a comment, and I'm sure it was not initiated by James Franklin. I'm sure he was responding to somebody, and it was concerning, hey, we got to get over the hump. We know that. Da, 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 da. So let's go back to Keandre Lambert-Smith. He takes his 53 catches elsewhere. I believe Auburn he signed.
Yeah. Auburn.
So what do you expect in the transfer portal? Do you think Penn State's going to be aggressive at any location on the field?
I think they will if the right piece falls there. You know, the one defensive end from Michigan State, his name is escaping my mind at the moment. I apologize. I think his first name was
Harmon.
Not him, the other one.
Kai Jobe?
Yes, Kai Jobe is one. I knew it was a 3-letter first name, and I couldn't think of it.
Kai Jobe.
He
I think
he was a player in his recruitment. Penn State was very heavily in on, so I could see them pursuing him because you just never have enough defensive linemen. And I think that's one name to watch. I think they're going to monitor the receiver market, but the guy who just left was the best receiver in the portal. So I think that kind of speaks of where receivers at in the portal right now. You're never going to stop looking, obviously. If they could find a depth linebacker, they would do it. There's some questions about linebacker depth with Carter moving to defensive end and Keon Wiley, who flashed at times last year, suffered a pretty gnarly injury this spring that may carry into the fall. So you'd love to find another depth piece there. But I think all in all, they're pretty happy with where the roster's at. And even a wide receiver, James Franklin has said it time and time again, talent has never been the problem. There's a lot of 4-star guys in that room. It's just a matter of stepping up and putting it all together. And I think that's where they're hopeful the impact of Julian Fleming will really be felt, because Fleming has come in with that mindset of a guy who spent the last 4 years in the best wide receiver room in football at Ohio State. That leadership, that work ethic, those things that the wide receiver room really has lacked since Jahan Dotson went pro 2 years ago, and especially last year after they lost Parker Washington and Mitchell Tinsley to the draft as well. So I think I do think Fleming coming in and providing that can help. Trey Wallace is a guy that had really high expectations for last year. I know we've talked about him before. An injury bug set in, had a really good spring game. I think if Trey's healthy, that helps a lot. And one other name at receiver I would say to watch is Caden Saunders, a former top 100 recruit who didn't play a ton last year, but always flashed when he did. Caught a touchdown against Ohio State, had a touchdown against Maryland, who seemed to really take a step forward this spring. So I think they'll continue to look for receiver. I don't know if they'll find a receiver, but they'll continue to look. But other than that, I think they're very happy with where this roster's at, because this is a roster that really, outside a receiver and depending on what Drew does, maybe quarterback, stacks up pretty well with just about everybody else in the conference.
Marty Lee, Penn State Rivals. You see his X handle right there. It's Marty L_53. Penn State Rivals is the place to catch Marty's work. Marty, we appreciate you stopping by as always, man.
Absolutely, Mark. Anytime. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Good stuff from Marty. We encourage everyone to use the Amazon link in the description section of all the videos. The Amazon link's available. Doesn't cost you a penny. Doesn't change your shopping experience. Let's bring in our guy, Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, how are you? Hello, Corey. Are you with us? Corey may be having some... I was just about to go to his banner, which says voice of Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm, but we have no voice to put with the banner. So we will have to go elsewhere. So hopefully Corey can connect here soon, because I was curious to get a number of musings from Corey, but in particular about Cooper DeJean and his status still on the board at the NFL draft. So hopefully Corey can make it. Corey, you with us? I don't know if Corey realizes that he's not with us or not. And yes, as is being stated here by one Scott Schrader, I rarely get on here and say, I told you so, but I did say get into the transfer portal in December for a quarterback, and now they need one. Corey, are you here? Now we've got dueling Coreys. Corey, this one, Corey.
Can you hear me?
There he is. We had two of you on
All
the
right.
screen for a while, and neither one was operational. So
Neither one was competent. So here's the deal. Once
Yep.
again, I'm en route. I'm traveling. So I'll give you kind of a bird's eye perspective from the countryside of central Iowa. Let me just address something real quick. Mark, you like to, what's the common term you like to use, or that we've had to help you not use when you have people that make dumb, idiotic comments that are not based on logic or fact? What's the
that those
word you
people
like
are dumb, or they're idiots, or they're morons.
There it
already
is.
called-
We have a winner. 3 times a lady, Mark. 3 times a lady. So here's the deal. I had a moron, and I won't name his name because I don't want to be that guy. But I posted a video late last night that Cooper was snubbed, and somebody's response. First of all, this was at least a reasonable response. Somebody said, "Well, you can't say he was snubbed because he was never a guaranteed lock." A couple things about that. In every mock draft that I looked at leading up to the draft, he was a first-round pick. I didn't see a mock draft, within a day or two of the draft that did not have him going first round. So take that as you will. I mean, Mel Kiper Jr. had him in his top 18. So, I mean, look, obviously, quarterback, wide receiver, offense heavy, first round. We get that. Now, as it relates to another, well, I'll let you respond to this person. I won't call this guy a moron, but another guy that said that my little expose on the whole Cooper DeJean situation was me being a homer. That he wasn't even sure if he's like, this is just recently, this guy said, I don't even know that Cooper DeJean will get taken in the second round. I wanted to say in my best Mark Rogers voice, all right, we have a moron in the comment section, but I didn't. All right.
You have a better voice than me, so you might as well just stay with yours.
Do you realize that he is the number 1 player on Kiper's board for the second round? Can you imagine the second round? Like, how dumb of a comment can you? I'm serious. How dumb of a comment or uneducated do you have to be to make a comment like that?
Well, did this individual back it up with some type of reasoning?
Do they ever, Mark? I mean, do they actually ever?
Well, sometimes they attempt to, but it still doesn't make any sense. Like, if he had some type of logical argument to make, which I don't know what that would be, another 32 picks. I will say it this way, Corey. Cooper DeJean's a very versatile athlete, just a tremendous player, technically sound, will be tremendous in the locker room as a leader, as a guy whose example should be followed, all of those things. Like, I don't know where the chinks in the armor are. I did hear from the analysis that I was listening to last night, because I'm not a draft guy in the sense that I don't prepare anything for the draft. Everything that you just stated about Cooper DeJean being on everyone's first round boards, I could have guessed that. I may have heard it from you at some point, but I didn't know that because I don't look at that stuff. I enjoy the draft itself. Now, the one thing I will say is that that's only 32 positions. So I don't look at it the same way as you do in regards to him being snubbed. I consider a snub as being something like, we don't like this person for some strange reason, so we're not going to, we're going to make a completely irrational decision because we're going to avoid this person. Obviously, these teams have nothing against Cooper DeJean. They just had different priorities. We would have to go through the first round, which I will here while you're speaking, because I'd like to see how many other defensive backs, strictly cornerbacks per se, were taken ahead of him.
Well, keep in mind, I'll just say this, and you know what I'm saying when I make this comment. There is a fine line between when you're a content creator on YouTube and you're operating a podcast that's, featured on multiple platforms, especially a platform as big and as competitive as the YouTube market is, you are very, very, you're dancing a very fine line between clickbait and attractive, clickable titles, right?
Yep.
And thumbnails. So I think I'll just leave it at that.
No, I understand that. And I don't hold that against you in any such way, because I certainly have taken that tact. And the two of us, if anyone out there follows us on a regular basis, and I believe they do, understand that we take a very measured approach, but we are still competing in a market that Corey just outlined. So we have to come up with attractive titles.
Now, maybe Mark, maybe real quick, maybe I could I, if you really wanted me to start dancing on the other side of that line, there's a few things I could do, including maybe I could put a video out like in the next 10 minutes before he gets drafted that basically states Cooper DeJean set to create another conference. Texas set to join the Cooper DeJean League, the Voice of College Football League.
Cooper responds to snubbing by saying he refuses to play in the NFL.
Did Cooper ask not to be drafted in the first round? Did Cooper join the From the Hawkeye of the Storm team in place of the NFL?
Well, I did not realize the dominance of the offense in this draft until I knew that it was very heavy. The first 14 selections are offense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's never happened. There's no way.
I'd have to go back, and I can't remember how many wide receivers Kiper had going in his first round. And I think he ended up like too short of what he expected. But how many receivers went, Mark?
Oh, my goodness. I would have to count them up. I don't think we want that dead air. I am looking at now. Okay, the first 14, all offensive players. I'm looking at corners. So we have one going to the Eagles at 22, the Toledo kid, Quinyon Mitchell, who I'm going to tell us. I doubt if anyone listening has any idea how good he is, because I certainly don't.
I believe he's good because if the scout's taking him out of Toledo, I believe that he's really good. That's what I'll say about that kid.
Yeah, exactly. That makes total sense. Terrion Arnold, I do know a lot about him and have watched him play extensively out of Alabama to the Lions. And then you've got Nate Wiggins. This is the one that would surprise me ahead of Cooper DeJean. Really good player, really fast, but so is Cooper DeJean. I don't know what the times, how they compare in the 40, but DeJean is a better cornerback. I'm not saying he's got better potential. The scouts, track the hip movement and all that business. But in regards to being a better cornerback, again, we have to dismiss the Toledo player because none of us watched him play. Cooper DeJean is probably better than Terrion Arnold, the Alabama, but that's a really good comparison. He is better than this Clemson cornerback right now.
Well, obviously, right?
Uh-oh. You're breaking up. I wanted to hear what Corey had to say right after that. But that's my analysis, folks. That's simply in watching a lot of Clemson football, a lot of Alabama football, that the Cooper DeJean, Terrion Arnold comparison is a debatable one. But I think Cooper DeJean, again, I'm not talking about as a prospect. That's what these scouts are paid to do. They know so much more than I do. But as a college cornerback, DeJean better than Wiggins. You still with us, Corey? Unfortunately, I think we lost him. So hopefully we get Corey back. If not, your comments and questions are certainly welcome here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all being here. And this is our Big Ten live show that we typically present at 7 p.m. Eastern time. but we're going at 5 this time around. Todd likes Corey. Good to know. Mike says, Cooper DeJean says that he's better than Ed Reed. That's clickable. There you go. Yes, we should have used that one. I need you guys to write headlines and titles for me. Can you do that? Yeah, so I was slightly surprised as well because I thought he was going to go in the first round. We know that the Michael Penix pick was really the reach of the first round. Corey, you with us?
Sorry about that. I'm back.
No, you're good. So the last thing I stated that I think I can make a statement about Arnold and Wiggins because I watch a lot of Alabama Clemson football. And again, I'm not a scout making a projection. I'm talking about who is the better cornerback in college football. And between DeJean and Arnold, it's a close call, but I go DeJean, and I go DeJean clearly over Wiggins from Clemson.
Okay. Well, I just was saying, I think last night Kuiper it wasn't like it was definitive that DeJean is better than Wiggins. In fact, I don't know if it's because you may know this because you're a former ESPN guy, but do those ESPN guys get some intel right before the pick is announced? I mean, do they have an idea who it is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because, all of a sudden, he's got Cooper DeJean as his number one DB, and all of a sudden he starts talking about how, they start showing Wiggins and talking about how he's a great fit here. And I'm like, I'm guessing they know before that announcement's made. So
yeah. Not long.
No, I have no problem. Like, it's all opinion based. What I don't like, and what I think you would agree with this, what I don't like is when people come with opinions stated as facts without any backing. All right. Someone had a problem with me saying, this is another person that, and I don't know if these people are Iowa fans. Somebody had a problem with me making the comment that I think Cooper DeJean may be the best Iowa player I've seen in a Hawkeye uniform. That is my opinion. Okay. And nobody else can tell me, no, you're wrong. Like that. He is one of, if not the best players I've seen in an Iowa uniform. Somebody said, it's laughable. Desmond King was better. Based on what? Like, based on what? You're just your opinion, right? And Desmond King has had a nice NFL season. Led the FBS in interceptions his junior year, came back his senior year and was pretty docile. And he wasn't drafted in the first round. So, I mean, we haven't had a single defensive back under Kirk Ferentz drafted in the first round. And guess what? Just because Cooper DeJean wasn't taken in the first round, he's still going to be the highest overall DB taken, right, under Kirk, because he's going to take in here one of the first couple selections at 6 or at 7 Eastern. So what he gives you is obviously much more than just cornerback value. I mean, there's whether he ends up switching over to safety at some point. I don't know what type of value a guy like that who's got such a track record of being able to help in various ways on special teams, how that affects his draft stock. Maybe it doesn't. I know Charlie Jones came in, was returning punts for the Bengals right away. So, I would guess that helps him. And I think a lot, my guess is that some of the hesitation from some of those programs 20 through 30 or franchises that passed up on him, some of that was likely the tiebreaker came down to, okay, the guy's coming off a pretty serious leg injury. That's if there's a toss up, that's an easy tiebreaker to use. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I just think a guy like Cooper is probably going to use that as motivation, assuming he stays healthy, and health is never a guarantee for anybody.
You wonder if the injury had anything to do with him sliding a bit? No,
I'm thinking it did. I would guess that it did. I'm guessing if he was, I would guess, I'm not an NFL draft expert, but if he had stayed healthy and played the remainder of the season, and that's kind of irrelevant because the fact is he didn't, but had he stayed healthy and continued to play like he was, he could have maybe been top 15. I don't know. I mean, based on needs, maybe not. I mean, that doesn't change the offensive needs that were obviously apparent in the league, but I think he was that good, and I feel bad for him because I've talked about this on the air. I can tell you on good authority, he wanted to come back. He wanted to return to Iowa. and it's not like he didn't have a pull to the NFL, but there were other circumstances, other pressure that led him to ultimately declare. And I'm not blaming the powers that be that led him to make that decision. But I think if he had what I was told last night from a good source is that had he known that he was going to slip to the second round, he probably would have just come back to Iowa because he wanted to anyways. But I think he was pretty confident, despite the injury, that he would still be a first rounder. And so it's unfortunate, but he is going to be able to be a free agent sooner, not being a first round draft pick, and maybe an opportunity to negotiate during a prime in his career. Again, assuming he stays healthy.
Your buddy Dave Valinsky is here with a super chat. I don't know if you can see it. It says, "No, Corey, that's a fact. Cooper was the Iowa football program."
Yeah, Mark, Nate, can you just real quickly, can you give me 5 players that were better than Cooper DeJean in the last 20 years at Iowa? You probably could, but I could also argue that they're not better than Cooper DeJean. Like, if you name Robert Gallery, Jack Campbell, Desmond King, George Kittle's not even in the conversation. Who else are we naming? Sam Laporta?
Or is Hawkinson or Fant in that?
Yeah, I mean, Hawkinson, Fant would be in the conversation. Sure. There's no quarterbacks in the conversation. Sean Green, would he be in the conversation? Okay, sure. He'd be the one running back that should be in the conversation. DJK, Marvin McNutt, those guys aren't better than Cooper DeJean. I mean, they were good wide receivers.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think people quite and I know I'm kind of basing this too off of some exhilarating moments, and I go back to the Minnesota play. I've never seen a guy make a play at Iowa quite like what he did when everybody's watching, when everybody knows that you're the only chance at pulling a rabbit out of your hat and finding a way to win a game you have no business being in. And he was the guy that did that time and time and time again, whether you're talking about Michigan State at home, whether you're talking about Minnesota, Rutgers on the road 2 years ago. It was just incredible the number of times he stepped up. And I think that's how I would sum up what he gives you that probably can't be measured from a combine.
Yep.
Is just, he's a gamer. And, we'll see. I think whoever gets him is going to get a steal.
Well, I think it's a valid opinion, and whether it comes into fruition, my response to you when you said something DM'd me about him being snubbed in the first round, I made a very obvious statement, just we'll see, because I'm not prepared to make that kind of assessment. I would tend to, you hold the gun to my head, I'm betting on Cooper DeJean. I am betting on his athleticism, his work ethic, his character. And as you mentioned, your last statement, your last point can't be said about a lot of players. His ability to make plays in the moment when they're needed, to be able to be a ball hawk. It's one thing when you're the number one running back and you're getting 25 carries, and so they're pitching you the ball at the 5-yard line with the game on the line. Yeah, that's still to be admired if you can come through, but that's what your position calls for. But when you have no control over where the football is going and you're able to do that multiple times in a season, that certainly shows something.
And just, again, we go back to the, performance-wise, what he was able to do in spite of the load that was placed on him, the number of snaps that defense had to carry, add that with the number of times he's on the field for either punt coverage or punt returning. I mean, he was on the field a lot. And then they briefly tinkered with him being on offense. That's how he ended up getting hurt. So and back to what Sean Garner says in the chat, Cooper played no man coverage in college. I hear that every single year, and I continue to see Iowa churn out successful DBs year after year after year, whether you're talking about Desmond King, Geno Stone, Amani Hooker, Dane Belton's been solid in the league. Josh Jackson has had, I think, a disappointing NFL career, but was obviously thought of very highly by NFL scouts. People know what they're getting with Phil Parker coached kids. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know that he's going to be a man corner in the league. I don't know what, I know there's this stigma about white corners and maybe lack of athleticism. I think that's an unfair stigma to be made. It's out there. he's as athletic of a corner as I've seen at Iowa. And I think he's more athletic than Desmond King was. Josh Jackson had his moments, Mark. His career is a little bit befuddling to me that he hasn't had a better NFL career, but he's kind of the one guy. Everybody else is pretty much panned out, kind of like you'd expect. And Iowa's had some nice stories of some guys that have kind of flown under the radar over the years that have, been successful. Julius Brents ended up transferring to Kansas State. He's in the league now. Greg Maben played for quite a while with the Niners, was a starter, successful starter. Amari Spivey is another one. So, I mean, this goes all the way back. This has been the Phil Parker-led DB room for a long time.
Switching to the current Hawkeyes before we let you go, Corey, appreciate you calling in tonight. Is there anything brewing that you've heard with your ear to the ground in regards to anything within the transfer portal that Iowa may be? They've got to get a quarterback, right? I guess they don't have to.
Well, they had a good visit with this kid from Missouri State, this receiver, this little speedster.
Yep.
I'm guessing he commits from what I've heard. I'm no insider, but I'm guessing it sounds like he's probably going to commit. And then it sounds like they're going to have another couple of players enter the portal. They finished team meetings yesterday, and I was told they're likely going to have at least two more before the end of the portal window. And by the way, to Todd in the chat, how was what I said racist? How is that a racist statement? Acknowledging that there's a stigma regarding white cornerbacks. How is that racist?
You were not stating that. There is a stigma. Yes. Let's be honest about this, people. Let's be honest. And is that stigma validated? It shouldn't be toward any one individual, but just look at the colors of the players that are playing. So
he's saying it wasn't directed toward me, so maybe it's some other comment. But anyways, yeah, I don't agree with the stigma. It's out there. I understand the data, but no, it'll be good to see him off the board here soon. And from an Iowa perspective, quarterback, receiver, and then they've also been in on a JUCO defensive lineman. So I'm assuming they're going to give him a scholarship if they end up offering and he commits. So I don't think you can just get, you have the NIL to work with if need be. But how much money is there to be handing out, these scholarships to people that they don't have them available for. So, but yeah, those are the three positions to look for. Definitely receiver. And then I think quarterback comes second.
So I would not discount your thoughts about yourself being an insider. I think you show from time to time you've built quite a little network there underground in Iowa.
I appreciate that, but I would discount it a little bit. I'm an insider when I want to be, Mark. When I really say I want to go get this guy on, or I want to go find information. But more often than not, I'm like, you know what? That ain't my day job. I am not concerned with hounding these kids and, figuring out how I can get inside information and what this guy ate for dinner on his visit. I just don't care about that stuff. So we'll let people like Elliot do that, Mark.
Absolutely. Well, Corey, thanks for stopping by.
Yep. We'll talk to you later, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Corey. Have a good night. Corey Bradda from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey and I get together every Tuesday at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. So please join us. It's a good time. I'm telling you, even if you could care less about Iowa football, join us on the Iowa Show. This is the Big Ten Live Show. We present it each and every Friday, typically with a call-in line, courtesy Tim Prangley, but we went early tonight. Just my thought was, I think people are invested in the NFL draft, so why don't we just go early tonight? And also, should I be truthful even beyond that? I'd like to watch the NFL draft. So there we go. I'd like to watch the NFL draft. So keep in mind, on Saturday, Nebraska post game after the spring game on the Huskers channel. Then also I'm going to go live at some point. The last 2 weekends, I've gone at 8 p.m. Eastern time, probably more of the same. Once all the spring games are completed, I'll gather all the intel. I'll be here live. And we're gearing up for some great content here at the Voice of College Football. It's been a little sparse in regards to me delivering regular videos because I'm doing all these live streams on the team channels, but we're going to tackle these all-time rankings and also 2024 program rankings. And also, yes, it's been sitting here forever. Top 10 games of 2024. Top 10 games, and also top 10 under the radar games for 2024. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. Enjoy the NFL draft. We will see you on Saturday. Huskers post-game live. Also, spring game wrap-up live on Saturday night.